The project request intake primarily starts in the client portal, right? So we need to create a couple of things in the client portal real quick. So let's, in the left navigation here in TD admin, let's go ahead and click on applications and then your client portal in the in the body here. And then in the left navigation, service catalog. So we're not going to do a full-blown service catalog build right now. We will, that is usually part of the ticketing implementation that we'll do in phase 2. But this is kind of a precursor to what you'll be doing down the road to develop all of your ticketing services and categories. So the same fundamental structure that I show you right now to create one project management category, one project management service, is what you'd be doing over we're going to be doing over in ticketing, and we're going to be building out down the road for dozens and maybe dozens and dozens of ticketing services that will kick off your ticketing process down the road. So just an FYI there. Okay. So in the left navigation, let's go to categories and create a parent category. Let's go to the green plus new button. Again, anytime you see any blanks, it means we got to create something either by plus new or somewhere else. Let's name this one project management. And it's going to be active. There are no other categories, so we can't make anything else parent to this. And let's go ahead and hit the green save button. It is active. We have one category. You can only see categories in the client portal, and we'll go and check on this one in a couple of minutes. But you'll only see a category pop up when a service is nestled underneath a category. So let's go to services in the left navigation and create our project request service. And again, we need our plus new button. And let's call this, now are most of your projects specific to IT, or are they organization-wide?
So I know Jeff Cantwell has a lot of projects that are based on organization, but it's IT related at the same time. So I don't know how you really define.
Then let's just name this project request. So now we have a category built. So the only one that should be out there is indeed the project management category. So if you start typing P or project, there we go. Let's go ahead and grab that. The manager or owner is typically the person who's going to make sure this service in the service catalog is kept up to date. So that for this type of service, it's typically a project manager, a senior project manager, the PMO director, somebody of that ilk. If this were a ticketing service, and let's say it's like the password reset ticketing service, it might be the help desk manager, so on and so forth.
We don't necessarily.
You can leave it blank. It's not a mandatory field for now. The asset application and maintenance window are typically part of a ticketing service, typically not part of a project management one. But the request application and type is what we need to leverage now, and that's a key. These are two key fields, right? So because this is a project request service, it indeed needs to be part of the project application. So this one's already built out. This drop down is already built out, part of the tool. So we want it as projects, right? As I talked about before, down the road, when we do all of our tickets services, we're going to be selecting tickets here. And then underneath, once you select projects, it cascades a window below that. And that's when our last call, if you recall, we created a project type. We start typing project here, we'll have a project service with a project type, probably the general project type. And that'll be the same thing on the ticket application. You might be using the general ticket type. We might create a bunch of other ticket types. So it could be so your application is tied to your project type here. The request service text is going to be the words on the button that the person selects when they want to start the request process or when they want to start the ticket request process. So if you hit the question mark it'll tell you the words that already exist on that button. And the button will say request service. So if you wanted to just continue to say request service, leave this field blank. If you wanted to say something different, then you type it in here. So it would say, you could potentially put in here, submit a project request. Let's just type that in so you can see what that looks like. Submit a project request. Let's capitalize the R just to be consistent there.
Yeah, meant to
And
do that.
then below, there we go. The request form, if we don't have one built yet, right? It'll use the out of the box one. So we're good, okay here, but we'll show you, that's going to be the next thing we do, is to show you how to edit and customize your request form. And then there are two descriptions of this service. There's a short description and a long description. And let's type that in each of these boxes, and then we'll see where it shows up. So type in this box, this is the short description. And then down in the long descriptions, type the same thing, except instead of short, just say long. This is the long description. Now the difference here is that the short description is just a text box area here with about 200 and I believe it's 275 characters that you could use in the short description. The long description is a rich text editor. As you can see, all of the bells and whistles from a content perspective that you can format the long description. Typically, the short description just tells a little bit about the project service, and the long description gives a little bit more definitive information about what your project criteria is. Here, projects at Imperial Valley College equal X, Y, and Z. You can change the font and the size and color, not color, but you can make it much more visually interactive, and you have a larger place to do that. The long description usually cements the idea that yes, this is the right service that the person needs, and gives them all of the information so that they feel comfortable hitting that request button to start your request intake process.
Got it.
So for now, let's go ahead and hit the green save button. All right. And then you can X out of here. If you don't do anything with the order, it will order things in an alphanumeric perspective. So it'll start with A, or if it's a number, it'll start with numbers.
Okay.
You can X out of here. Hit the blue refresh button just to make sure our service is here. There it is. And then let's go out to your client portal. Now you can get there. You have several of, if you go to your 11.1, one of those tabs, yep, that's your TD Next interface. Go to your application menu here, and then click on the tile that says Client Portal. There we go, and that'll open up your client portal. And in here, we are building these services in the services area. So if you click on services, here's our service catalog. We have one category titled Project Management. And again, you can have a short description underneath that. But if you click on Project Management, you'll see our one service titled Project Requests. And there is the short description. Again, it's going to be just a small box. And then the long description, when you click on that, will show this whole white area here. And you can embed via rich text editing much more detailed information about this particular request. Ultimately, though, that green submit a project, that's the text you typed in, submit a project request. And you can change that. Obviously, you saw where you changed that if you wanted to say something different. But that starts the project intake process, right? That starts phase one of that three-phase process we talked about. Phase one being project request intake. Phase two is project request review, so reviewing all the data that the requester provided and going through your workflow process. And then after phase two, it gets most likely approved and activated and turned into a real project and stays a project during its life cycle in phase three. So let's see what it looks like out of the box when we hit that submit a project request. So this is the out of the box request form, right? We haven't edited the form yet, but we can edit it to include much more information here. The three pieces that are mandatory baked into the tool is the project name. So we must name it something. So type in here like a test project request. The other mandatory field is the account department. And that you have to select from the existing account departments that you've built. Or if you were to put a sponsor in here and the sponsor had a default account department on their user record, then the account department would auto-populate to that user. If you did not list a sponsor here, meaning that that field was not in here because you design it to not have the sponsor, then the account department would populate per the requester's account department if that requester's user record had a default account department on their user record. Does that make sense?
Sure, clear as mud. It's Monday.
It doesn't
So
make
let me
any
show you
sense at
that real
all.
quick.
No, I get it. Yeah. So
Let's go.
basically, but there's a lot of, yeah, as long as everything's defined properly, it should populate something.
Yeah. Let's show you this real quick. So go back up to the tab next to the one we're at to the right that says services. And let's back out of service catalog and back out of applications, go down to users and roles, and then users. All right. And then go ahead and click on your user, your name, James. All right. So every user record has a default account department field. It's not auto-populated, right? It's either manually populated, right there, a default account department, enterprise services, right? It's either manually defined by administrators, right, by building the account departments first and then going in and putting in default account departments, or the people import can populate the default account department. Again, the account department does need to be in the tool first for it to select from. And then part of that people import process, the spreadsheet that you build out has a column for the defaulted account department. So that potentially via the people import, every user record in here could potentially have a default account department, right? So let's say James was the sponsor on this particular project, then it should auto default to his enterprise service one. So let's see if it does that. So James, go into the sponsor field right above here, put your name, and there it switched to enterprise services, the account department.
No, actually, I put that actually in there. Sorry. So it should auto populate.
So again, if the account department, if a default account department is on a user record, then when the sponsor is selected, account department will auto-populate to the sponsor's defaulted account department. If that sponsor, some people don't want that sponsor field on their request form. Why? Because they either don't know who the sponsor is or they don't have it. So they take that sponsor field out. If they take that sponsor field out, then the account department is still mandatory and it's going to default potentially to the defaulted account department of the requester. So in this case, James is acting as both requester and sponsor.
The sponsor is who? Is the
That's usually the the business manager that the project is being done for. So in PMI speak, Project Management Institute speak, the sponsor is the person who can remove hurdles, whether it's financial, cultural, um, institutional when a project runs into any major issues or risks. The sponsor is the business manager, supervisor, VP level, who the project is ultimately being done for. Is typically the primary key stakeholder. Oftentimes they're not part of the typical project team. They are included on communications, and they help with big rocks that need to be moved around, but they're typically not like part of the day-to-day project team. That's usually the project manager, functional manager for the department that the project's being done for. The sponsor is usually like a level removed, somebody who's got some weight in the organization that can make sure things are getting done on the project.
Well, that's going to vary quite. Yeah, that will vary widely. So maybe we
Yeah,
should just
absolutely.
keep it
And
off.
some organizations,
Keep it off for
yeah.
now.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I'll show you how to remove that when we design your request form. So let's keep going down a couple of these fields. Again, these are out of the box fields that can be updated, edited, deleted, added to. So classification often is something that is not well defined out of the gate. That field oftentimes gets removed. This is one where we've pre-built classifications for you, and the ones that we've pre-built are just suggestions, and they are maintenance, operations, or projects. And people are like, well, this is a project. What do you mean by that? So what they're saying is that that's the classification overall, like a large umbrella that this project is being done for. Is this a maintenance type of project, right? Is it to maintain or fix something that's broken? Is it an operations project where it's just kind of keeping the lights on? It's operational type project, or is it a project classification, like a brand new project? So you guys can change those words if you want to from your classification perspective, or you don't have to use classifications at all. Oftentimes in classifications, what people change those to, and again, this is kind of more PMI isms, is instead of maintenance, operations, or projects, they change those words to something like run, grow, or transform, right? And those are just flowery terms to describe what this project is doing. A running type of classification on a project would be just keeping things as is, right? This project is being done just to keep and I'll use an old term, our AS400 up and running, right? Transform is like taking us from A to B, right? It's transforming the organization or the department. We're going from a current state to a better state, kind of a linear transformation. And then transform, or what did I say? Run, grow. Grow is linear. Transform is hyperbolic, right? Transform is like bleeding edge. We're going from A to Z, and we are, brand new technology coming in. So run, keeping it as is. Grow, linear. Transform. We are stratosphere, taking us into the stratosphere. And the reason that some people use that is to understand the project mix that they have in their portfolio, right? And again, if you go back to the Project Management Institute, they will say it is good to have a certain percentage of your active projects in all three areas. What that percentage is certainly is up to you. But I think if you look into any project management percentage on run, grow, and transform, roughly, and these are ballpark, roughly the run starting out should be and probably is in the 50 to 60% range, right? The grow is in the 20 to 30% range, and the transform is in the 10, maybe 20% range, right? Because it takes a lot of learning and education to understand brand new technology, transformational type technology projects, right? The running, everybody knows how to run a certain type of project like that, keep the lights on. It doesn't take a lot of new knowledge to do a project like that. Probably a lot of those are rinse and repeat. To grow, it takes a little bit more. To transform, it takes even more. So starting out, most institutions, if you look at the mix of projects you have, you can probably put them in those three categories. And if you're in zero in transform, that's okay. Many people are. But the idea is over time, as your project management maturity increases, and by time, we're not talking months, we're talking a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road, you're trying to get that mix inside those three areas to be leaning towards transformational more and running less, right? So if you start out 50 to 70% in run, 20 to 30% in grow, 10 to 20% in transform, if that's where you are today, hopefully three to 5 years down the road, your run is more in the 30 to 50, grow is in the 20 to 40, transform might be in the 30 to 40, right? And over time, you're sliding that spectrum a little bit more so that you're doing more transformational type projects that are really helping out your whole organization. But with all that said, you don't have to leverage classification. If out of the gate you're like, that's just too much for us right now, we just want to, do some basic project management. We don't need to carve it up that. But that's a typical, and I've been actually trying to get our organization to default the classification instead of maintenance, operations, and projects to run, grow, and transform. But so far I haven't been able to do it yet. I'm trying to transform the organization. All right. The next field down is the priority, which again actually is a mandatory field, even though it's not shown here, because you can hide it from your requester. And why would you want to hide the priority from your project requester?
Because everything's
Any
a high
guesses there?
priority. Everything's a high
Ding, ding,
priority if
ding.
you ask them.
Winner, winner. Yep. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. That's exactly right. So you can hide the priority from them, but still make it part of the request in the back end so that the PMO, somebody reviewing the request, can get a more accurate reflection of what type of priority is this, and then set it appropriately internally so that it's a medium versus they think it's a high, right? Same thing with the requested start and requested end date. You can certainly leave those on there, but one of the caveats there too is that they're going to want it today and they want it to be ended tomorrow, right? Plus, they don't typically know how long it takes to put a project team together, to build a project plan, to do all the project management processes, and they have no idea that, in their mind, what should take a month could take a year. What in their mind might take 2 months could take 6 months to a year, so on and so forth. So you may want to leave the requested start and end date in there. You may want to remove it altogether, or at least hide it from them and put it back in the back end. If you were to leave the start and end date in here, I would recommend adding, and I'll show you how to do this in a minute, adding a custom field that says something along the lines of, why is this the requested end date, or end date justification, something like that, and leave it as a text box. Maybe even make it mandatory that they have to fill that out, right? Because if they're going to fill an end date here, maybe they do have a legitimate reason on why they need it to be done by start of the semester or by January 1. Maybe there's a state law or a new ruling that's kicking in that you have to have this by January 1, or that the class is starting September 1 and we have to have it done by then. So they might have a legitimate reason that it needs to be ended by that particular time, but force them to tell you why so that you can get on the same page with the end date if you let them populate those two fields. Description requirements, pretty standard there. And then for now, these are just the items that are part of this out-of-the-box general request form. So let's scroll back up and hit the save button. And this is just the first part of your overall intake process that your requester is going to have to go through. So again, the request form is this general area. In the left navigation under our business case, the general is the request form that we're looking at again. We're seeing the exact same fields here. It just gives the requester a second pass through to make sure all of their information here is accurate, right? So the requester has to complete this business case, which can start to look like a project charter, right? Again, more project management isms, right? And how much information you want them or need them to fill out in the business case is completely up to you, right? The red circles here for these items that say general goals, systems affected, related processes, organizational risks, benefits, files, and role forecasts, those have just been turned on out of the box by us, right? And you can actually add more fields in here, or we call these sections. You can add more sections in here if you need to, or you can subtract these out and have fewer sections. So part of this is thinking through how much information do you need your requesters to supply to you to be able to do a thorough request review process so that you can eventually get to either an approved project request or a denied project request, right? So we're going to be spending some time talking specifically about these sections here on our next call tomorrow. But for now, I'm going to show you if you do have these red circles, and these are just marking these sections to true. That's why the red circles are here. If we mark these sections to false, we wouldn't see them. And so there's other ones that are not being seen here because we have out of the box marked them to false. So I just want to show you with James driving what the requester is going to have to do, and then we'll go back into the design part of the tool. So he's on the general section and he has to hit the blue mark complete button, whether he makes an edit here or not. So hit the blue mark complete button, gives a checkbox next to general. Then he has to go down to goals, click on goals, and the same thing here. This is again a part of the tool where there's no data in here. If he goes to the add button, there's not going to be anything in there because again, we haven't built anything out. But he does need to mark it complete just to show that he has reviewed this area. And that has a check mark next to goals. And then he's just going to kind of do this dance several more times. Systems affected, mark complete. Related processes, mark complete. So that all of the red circles get changed to blue check marks. And again, we'll do a deep dive on these items here so you know what they mean and if you want to leverage them or not. Files are often for sure kept because that's just allowing people to add attachments and they might have a supporting documentation that they want to provide. So we usually almost always keep the files available for your requesters. Role forecasts. So let me talk about role forecasts for a minute. On our last call, if you recall, we talked about functional roles. Functional roles are going to talk about the type of job people do on projects. And so if you've built out functional roles like a DBA, a network engineer, systems admin, then you can add from this. So go to the add button here, the blue add button. I think we put a couple functional roles in here. Up where it says functional role, start typing, click on the lookup search menu button there. I think we had a couple, right? Yeah, so DBA, financial aid analyst, those two, and then the participants, the defaulted one. So you could say, I need a functional role of database administrator or financial aid analyst, so on and so forth, right? So again, this is one of those considerations on should we be allowing your requester to select the functional roles that they think they need on a project, because it will not only allow you to
No.
select the functional role, right? Yep. And the reason why you probably can guess, because they have no idea. Number one, they don't know what roles are going to be needed. Number two,
Exactly.
see the role start and end date. They can already start to set what they think might be that role and when they need it. When they need it, they have no idea, right? Because if your start and end date on James's request here was, June 22nd, and the end date was December 31st, it opens up that window to start saying, I need a database administrator starting June 22nd through August 1st on my project. And I need a systems engineer starting, July 30th to, November. And most of the time, the requesters don't have that expertise to know that type of stuff. But the reviewers of this information do, and that's usually when you turn that stuff on, and I'll show you that here in just a second. So let's go ahead and X out of this little screen here. So click Mark Complete. The risks register is a recent addition from about 1.5 to 2 years ago. Again, based on Project Management Institute recommendations that risks should be gathered from the inception of a project idea through its completion, because you could articulate risks of not doing it. So if this project were to get, excuse me, declined, this request, and people started gathering risks that if we don't do this project, we're going to lose business, then you start gathering that using this risk register. Excuse me, got a little tickle in my throat. So let's hit the review and submit button, and then hit submit, and then OK. All right, so James, as the requester, can see this. Think of James currently as not being an administrator, as just being a client licensed person who just submitted a request. You can see there's a gray bar now underneath your guys' blue bar where it says project request services, so on and so forth. Underneath projects workspaces, it says project requests and ticket requests. So all of your client license holders, your free client license people, will have that gray bar available to them. So when they submit projects or tickets, they can see the status of those types of things. So if you click on project requests, you can see here's your test project request, and you can see it's in a submitted status, right? And if you click on the word, your request, test project request, you can see the detail that you've provided, and you can see the information and your feed, all of the items that you've touched along the way. So this is just the viewpoint from the client license perspective in TD Client. Let's see where this request landed in TD Next, right? So let's go back to TD Next. That's TD Admin. Go up to one of them that says 11.1. That's all right. There you go. All right. So all project requests during the request phase stays not in projects, because it's not a project yet. It's still a request. It lives inside this thing called portfolio planning. Portfolio planning. It looks like a speedometer. There you go. Click on that, and then in the left navigation, click on the blue project requests word, and there it is. So this will hold all of your project requests as they come in, as they're submitted. And then from here, they have to go through. Go ahead and click on test project request and go to the green actions button, and it says assign to workflow. All requests must go through a workflow, and that starts the phase 2 portion of our 3-phase PPM implementation, right? Before we get to phase 2, though, we have to finish up on phase 1, on the intake. So we'll circle back to this eventually. Let's go ahead and X out of here And now we need to design two things. Our request form, so that it meets the intake data that your requester needs to fill out, and those red circles on the business case, right? So let's see those two things. Let's go back to TD admin and go ahead and back out of users and roles. And we're going to be in portfolio planning, correct? And then we are going to be, first thing, let's go down to project/request sections. So this gives us a great visual of our three-phase approach. Phase one, request intake, is the for requests column, the fourth one over. So for request is phase one. For reviews, think of that as phase two. And then for projects is phase three. So remember those red circles on those business case items that James just had to do that dance between clicking on it, mark complete, clicking on it, mark complete. Those items were marked true in for requests. So line order 3 goals, if you remember, it says true, it has a red circle. Systems affected, number 4, it says true, it had a red circle. Related processes, 5. And if we keep going down that list and for requests, anything that says false in here, we didn't see, right? We didn't see expenses, we didn't see returns, we didn't see scorecard, we didn't see resources, because these were all set to false, right? So part of this is understanding what these sections contain. We'll be talking about that in a deep dive tomorrow. And then we'll have you either turn these on or off based on that information. And then we'll do the same thing in phase 2 for reviews. We'll decide we might want several things turned off in phase 1, but we want them to remain as true in phase 2, and certainly keep them as true in phase 3. So we'll go over a deep dive of these sections and how they help out in your intake and review process. But before we end, I want to show you that request form and how you can start to design that. So in the left navigation, let's go over to request forms, and let's go to the green plus new button. And let's name this one general project request form. And we do want it active, and we do want to copy it from, oh, go ahead.
So the request form can be tailored based on what it is that they're requesting.
Yes, you can design it to gather the data and information you need to be able to do a thorough review of the request to make sure you want to approve it or decline it.
Right. So I guess for some things that would be applicable to enterprise, that would not, that would be applicable to enterprise, not to application services. Can we put don't apply or something, or tell them to actually, what I'm thinking for my group is to have them fill out a ticket requesting a project, and then for us to meet with the end user to fill out the project request.
That's not a bad strategy. Let's talk a little bit about that tomorrow to start, and we'll talk about multiple project request services versus one generic one, and we'll talk about the pros and cons of each of those strategies.
Okay, yeah, because I can see our end users having a lot of trouble filling this out.
And that's what we'll talk about. Sometimes people want this whole process, this phase 1 intake process, to be as minimal as possible for the requester, right? Because there's a lot of spoon feeding and hand holding that you guys have to do anyway. So you just want to get the intake over quickly so that you can get the initial request and then sit down with them and go through
Exactly.
it.
Exactly.
And you control the mouse and let them tell you the words.
Right.
So for
Yep.
now, let's go ahead and copy it from, well, there's nothing to copy from. So go ahead and hit the save button. And we only got 2 minutes, but let's go ahead and click on the general project request form, and we're going to see the designer. And so here's where you guys can design your form to make it as thorough as you need or as minimal as you'd like. You can see these are the 3 mandatory out-of-the-box fields that will stay on here. You can't remove these. You can try, but it won't let you. So the other fields you would add as fields from the right, either out of the ones that are here on the right navigation, we see classification, end date, start date, description, requirement, sponsor name. You can add those to this form. So we're going to end the call for now, and tomorrow we're going to come back and start with talking about the strategy of having multiple project service or starting it in the ticketing application. And then we'll come back and we'll design this form for you and work on designing it. And then we'll start talking about those project request sections. We'll talk about that minimalist kind of strategy that you guys have been talking about.